I find it funny how many people seem to take my Marc Lovallo as an alien video seriously. You know, how could one not enjoy the glorious lunatics? Anybody who would admit to not liking lunatics is definitely not connected to human society, aka an alien. As well as the other little jokes I've made about him here and there in my videos about the Eddsworld fan movie. Then again, I know his audience. There are unfortunately plenty of people in fandoms all across internet land who don't want to be challenged on any level and take every hyperbolic joke way too seriously. And the Eddsworld fan movie shorts tend to cater to this audience. So of course Marc has a lot of mindless followers, but none of what I've said or what I think about these types of fans or even his content really impact how I feel about him as a person. It's always important to remove the art from the artist in these situations. Good people can make bad art and vice versa. I find it important to note that as of now, every single member of the Eddsworld fan movie crew who has interacted with me or my videos have been exceptionally kind and have left many thoughtful responses. And while Marc hasn't interacted much with my content as of yet, from my perspective, he seems like a nice enough guy. I'm sure we could have a nice civil chat about all of this. I just happen to dislike his overall style in the Eddsworld fan movie. I've thought about this for a while, trying to decipher why those shorts just don't quite work for me. I believe it comes down to this. I don't think his comedic style fits with Eddsworld. The editing and pacing is too slow and awkward, which can work for some jokes but not every single one, and a lot of the gags are too meandering or rely on pointless references, as I mentioned before. And all of this just doesn't quite feel in the true spirit of Eddsworld in the same way that something like The Legacy did. But again, that does not dictate how I feel about Marc as a person. The reason I feel the need to emphasize this is because people need to understand that I do not hold a personal vendetta against Marc himself. Also, there's a chance he's watching this video. So, Marc, if you are watching, the criticisms in this video are all just my suggestions. Keep making your content however you want. Do what makes you happy. Take my opinion with a grain of salt, yada yada yada. Now, with my warnings out of the way, let's get on with the review. One thing I see often posted on Marc's Twitter is his original animated series, Anytown. I got curious after seeing bits and pieces of it for a while, and eventually I had the drive to learn more about it. Luckily, the animatic for the pilot episode had recently been posted to YouTube, at the time being under 1,000 views. So I watched it, and let's just say I found it interesting. The concept for Anytown, while not the most original in the world, is pretty great. It's a comedy about a guy who moves to a new town where literally anything is possible, and he's surrounded by a multitude of colorful characters. To me, this concept feels like Eddsworld meets Gravity Falls meets Wayside. There's a lot of potentially interesting scenarios that could come from this premise, and this concept has been done amazingly in animation before. Although, with Marc's previous work, I did feel at the start that this definitely had a lot to prove in terms of its execution, because a great idea can still be executed horribly. But enough gibbering and jabbering, let's just take a look at the pilot. We open with a scene that moves a bit too slowly, in which a car drives into a campsite where a bunch of cabins are, and we meet our main character Tyler, who's waking up for the morning. He looks at the water, and explosion. Despite the kind of slow start, I don't actually mind this opening at all, and I really like Marc's acting here. His often nonchalant tone fits perfectly for the character and scenario, and despite the pacing issues in the first 30 seconds, the timing afterwards is actually much better for most of the jokes than in his other work.
What a beautiful day. Oh, and it's Saturday too.
So now we meet another character, Phoebe. She's a science geek, and she's shy and quiet. We're introduced to the tone and the warped logic of Anytown with this casual conversation about explosive cheese goblins. Overall, ignoring the early issue, we have a pretty strong start. But then...
I know what you're thinking. Wait, cheese goblins? How did that happen? Yeah, it sounds weird, and about a month ago, I would have felt the same way. That's when I first moved here from California. But what I didn't realize then was that this kind of crazy stuff happens all the time. After a while, you just start to get used to it, but in a good way. In Anytown, New Jersey, anything's possible.
Okay, for whatever reason, this is something that so many people in entertainment don't seem to understand. Narration isn't always necessary. Sometimes, oddly enough, things can be interpreted through the tone, situation, and exposition through dialogue. You know, stuff that takes place within the story itself rather than something that breaks the immersion for many viewers. I find narration to be a lazy trope in media that should really only be used if it's absolutely necessary in providing information or enriching the experience.
텔레비전은 시계이자 달력이고 학교고 집이고 교회며 친구이자 애인이다.
Or if you want to mock the stupidity of the trope in my case. Yup, that's me. Mr. Popper. The majority of the information put into the narration could easily be gathered through what has already occurred, or what will occur when it comes to Tyler being new in town. And anything mentioned in the narration that isn't brought up at any other time is a smaller detail, like how Tyler is from California and can be easily inserted into the later dialogue scenes. It would make much more sense to remove this narration altogether and have the audience come to these conclusions themselves, rather than just have it spoon-fed to them. Narration and other exposition that exists outside a story's universe just bother me if they don't somehow provide information that can't be gathered elsewhere, don't enhance the experience, or aren't used in a satirical way, especially if it could be removed with no overall changes to the story. Useless narration like this comes off as not being very intelligent, and the majority of the time, it's better to assume that your audience is smart enough to get it. With that started out of the way, we get to the theme song, and comparisons aside, this tune is pretty damn catchy. Don't get me wrong, the lyrics are pretty bland and simplistic. When your friends are by your side, there's nothing that you can't do. But the actual music is really upbeat and well composed, and I don't know, I don't feel like I should be expecting Jeff Tweedy level lyrics in a cartoon theme song. But that's just me. I have seen a comment or two from people who didn't like its simplicity. Maybe I've just listened to so many genuinely awful theme songs that it makes me appreciate the good ones a bit more. So in the next several scenes, we meet with the other main characters that Tyler and Phoebe greet that morning. We start with Amanda, and she acts exactly like how you would expect someone who looks like her to act.
I didn't know they had a new album.
Neither did the record company, or the mainstream public. But you know me, I love anything that isn't as popular as it was in the early 2000s.
Then we have Dean, who has a really annoying voice.
Incredible! This social and political commentary is clearly dated, but is somehow still relevant today. Oh, I'm just reading an old issue of Captain Spazgard. It's issue 816.
Oh my god! Grant, I didn't know Marc Lovallo based a character off you!
Fuck you.
So, Dean is a somewhat energetic geek who loves comics, and that is the only thing that defines his character. Great.
Oh, I like that one.
Oh, you read it?
Well, I just like to look at the pictures. That's the artist side of me.
Oh, by the way, how's your comic coming along?
It's great.
On second thought, maybe you shouldn't use dialogue as your main form of exposition. I'll admit, while many of these lines are decently well written, plenty of them are just as awkward and simplistic and unrealistic to how actual humans speak as I thought they'd be.
So, you're really us from another world?
The opening was effective in making the strange scenarios seem normal and commonplace by making the characters talk in a way real people casually talk. But with lines like this, it reminds me that this is a fictional place with fake people in it, and the immersion is lost for a bit. Then we have Chris. This guy has essentially 0 personality traits.
But that's not true. He's a filmmaker.
But that's not a character trait! That's a hobby or a job! Most people are defined by more than just the activities they enjoy, especially when it comes to the way they interact with others. Being short-tempered is a personality trait of mine that heavily impacts the way I interact with the people around me. Being an animator is not. Animation is a hobby of mine. Sure, people's interests can have an effect on their personality and the things they talk about, but that shouldn't be the only thing that affects it when you're trying to write a sympathetic character. Every significant line from this guy just reminds you of the fact that he is an independent filmmaker and he's working on his projects constantly. There's an idea for a character here, but not much of a dynamic put in place. He's always making himself busy and he likes to do everything on his own. That's a good start, but how does that impact the way he acts? He talks about all the projects he's making and how much of the work will be his, but everything that could remotely make up his personality is just glossed over and even contradicted by future events.
Can't talk right now, Phoebe. I'm busy writing the script for my next short film. Then I have to shoot it, then I have to edit it, and then I have to do the music for it, and...
Phoebe and I talked about getting the gang together and going out for a walk. You down?
Sure. Great filmmakers need a little time off every now and then. Like with my movies, I do most of the work myself, but if I need someone to help with anything, I ask.
So basically, this guy is just a giant nothing character. Even worse, he does almost nothing the entire pilot, so he could be removed from the storyline and nothing of note would change. Chris says that one of the other characters, Lauren, is missing, so Tyler and Phoebe leave with her in mind while also checking up on a few of the other characters. So now we meet Esmeralda.
La 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 la.
I hate her. She's very expressive and dynamic in her movements, which I can certainly appreciate both as an animator and as a viewer, and her voice actor is clearly having a ton of fun with these lines.
And the colors are dreadful! Where did you get them?
The laundry?
Ugh, I feel lightheaded.
But I just hate her character. She is so annoying and obnoxious, not just in the way she acts, but more so in how one-note she is. She likes fashion, and she overreacts to anything and everything, especially that which relates to fashion. This character has been done before countless times, and done better at that. And there is no variation on this trope, right down to her having a posh British accent and calling everyone
Darling, 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 darling.
While I do find her delivery humorous at times, the actual lines she says aren't that funny on their own. And then there's Brendan, who has little to no personality whatsoever. Are you starting to see a trend here?
Hey! Do you know the show Johnny Bravo? I mean, yeah. Well, here's the thing! Look it! It's the thing! Do you get it? Do you get it? Do you get it? Do you get it? No! I don't get any of your references! Where is the setup? Where is the punchline? Where's the payoff? Do you think it's just funny for just references to be in there? Like, that's all you need to make a joke? You think you're gonna get more internet points from people who say, oh, I know that thing. This is a good show. Judging by your audience, I guess so. And another wait. How did you get into my house? Bye!
He's a brainless bodybuilder athlete man who always likes to show off his fit body. This archetype, once again, has been done before, and just like Chris, he could be removed from the episode and nothing would be lost. And then, after searching for this other character they've been talking about for so long, they immediately run into Mabel. I mean Pinkie Pie.
Hello.
She's super energetic and hyper and squeals a lot and bounces around and is generally super affectionate and touchy with others. I've never seen this character before, although to be fair, this is my reaction when I see a diner serving breakfast all day.
Wow, Lauren, you seem very excited today.
Oh wait, am I?
The problem with a lot of these characters is that they don't seem to be satirical or unique in any way. They're just the same tropes you see everywhere, especially in animation. And I know what you're thinking.
Oh, Ava, you're a dirty hypocrite because the characters in My Boring Afterlife are all like that too.
Well, yeah, they are. Because that's the entire point. My Boring Afterlife is a comedy that pokes fun at cliched adventure and apocalypse stories. That is the show's purpose. The first episode literally opens by saying this show is about the brains that brought in the comic relief. Do you really think I was trying to be completely original in the creation of these characters? No, because it's a parody. Anytown is not a parody, or if it is, that fact is not communicated very well. It just seems like it's using character archetypes for the sake of convenience and adding nothing to them. And that would be fine if this show was something like the original Total Drama, which had well-known character archetypes in a new and interesting scenario. But like I said before, Anytown's concept, while interesting, isn't the most original. So, characters I've seen before, with a concept I've seen before, in a show with little to no self-awareness other than lines like this.
Your sugar glider's name is Shug?
Creative? Nah. Adorable? Absolutely.
The moral's been taught. Group hug!
Oh, we will get to that later, don't you worry. So now we meet Mike, who's another science guy working on a machine of some sort, and who Phoebe has an obvious crush on. Man, I wonder how this next scene is gonna go, where Fluttershy invites the science man to go out into town with everyone. Is she gonna stutter and fumble with her words? Is he gonna seem calm and collected, but secretly share the same feelings? I sure do wonder what's gonna happen. The show is so unpredictable, guys. But allow me to continue to beat the rotting, mangled corpse of a horse It's still better than the last romance Marc wrote. So now we have a scene of the gang showing Tyler around the town, once again making the beginning narration useless because we can clearly see here that Tyler is newer to Anytown. We get some dialogue that further emphasize a couple characters' one trait, and then we get a few cutaway gags. I'll say up front that cutaway gags tend to be very polarizing for me. They've been done really well in some of my favorite shows, but oftentimes they're very poorly executed. When it comes to the bad ones, not only are they made just to take up time, but they serve no actual narrative purpose unless it is related to some kind of event in the same episode. And I get that most of the time the point of cutaway gags is just to be a random funny thing, which is exactly why I find the trope polarizing, because if a cutaway gag isn't funny, it's negating its own purpose. However, here, they're actually really well implemented. They're handled in a similar way to the cutaway gags in Gravity Falls, because not only do most of them actually play a role in the story later on, but they're also legitimately funny. The timing here is actually on point. At one point, I was laughing despite a pointless reference being plain in sight in the joke, and the Lactose King gag actually works perfectly with Marc's style of slower, more awkward comedy. The writing felt much less restrained by a certain other tone or setting it wasn't used to. So then we learn about the founder of Anytown through a recently put up statue.
That's Derek Schwingham, the founder of Anytown.
Oh, I just remembered. Last week was the non-specific anniversary of when Anytown was founded.
We also get to learn about the founder's tragic backstory, and the ideas here have a lot of comedic potential, and potential that I don't think was missed. However, that doesn't mean that none of the jokes in this episode were missed potential.
His life was made into a TV movie. I saw it on the Pixie Channel.
Well, I hope you don't actually believe that people spontaneously broke into modern pop musical numbers in 1869.
Wait! They didn't?
I half expected this somewhat lame joke would be used as a setup for a later punchline. Like when this guy inevitably comes back to life, he ends up actually breaking into some kind of modern pop musical number. But that didn't happen, so as is, the joke is just kinda meh. So while the others go to that diner that was mentioned earlier, Tyler stays by the statue because the plot thing needs to happen. Does this also fall in line with his character? I don't know, because his character isn't that defined. Tyler has a similar problem to the others, where he doesn't have much of a personality beyond a trope. He's the everyman, and based on the performance alone, he's generally pretty down to earth. That's it. There are plenty of main characters in comedies like this where they play this similar role while also embodying a lot of personality. In Gravity Falls, Dipper was the everyman, but he was also awkward, curious, paranoid, self-conscious. He was identifiable in his character and relatable to the young teen audience at the same time. The everyman trope is used so the audience is able to easily connect to the main character in their insane situation, whether for comedy, morals, or both, which is great. That's much better than having only eccentric characters and nothing to balance that. But when the trope is taken too far, opposite to the problems of tropes embodied by Lauren or Esmeralda, the everyman character is just a bland, empty shell of a person with barely defined traits, created solely so the audience can insert themselves into their position. I'm going to project my own personality onto this character because his actual one is so ambiguous. Unless your story is literally in the second person point of view, I find that to be lazy writing and a wasted opportunity of, by definition, the most important character in your show. And in this episode in particular, with the message it teaches, Tyler being so bland is a serious detriment. So, of course, Tyler accidentally opens the thing that was underneath the statue, and the undead founder of the town escapes. Again, the comedy here isn't half bad. Sure, it's slowly paced, but for this build-up to the reveal, it makes sense to do it that way. And the delivery from the actors really make this episode. So now we cut back to the diner, where we once again get a pretty solid joke. And in this case, one that actually sort of does something with the over-the-top personalities of the characters other than just stating the obvious. And they see everyone panicking outside. And I know I should be focusing on the joke going on here, but I'm just a little distracted by a tiny little detail in the background. This came out in 2019, so after another joke that lands pretty well, we cut back to Tyler, who tries and fails to defeat the zombie. After his friends catch up to him, we get
Tyler!
So, Anytown is trying to have a more tense and sad moment that explores one of Tyler's flaws. I guess there isn't anything wrong with that on paper. Let's see how it's handled.
We've got to stop him!
But it's okay. I can take care of it. I can do this on my own.
Oh yeah, because that's what you prefer.
These first couple of lines right here are actually pretty well implemented, taking an interaction from earlier and reincorporating it to give it a new meaning. Then we get these lines.
Tyler, you can't do this alone.
Of course I can. He doesn't stand a chance against me.
You tried to crush him with a tree, and he survived.
And sure, they're hammering in the point a little bit, but it's not half bad. And the expression in Tyler's face here shows more about his character and current emotions than any dialogue he could have at this moment. But then...
Come on, Tyler. Don't shut us out.
Please, you're our friend.
And we just want to help you.
I'm gonna hold this thought for later.
So after Tyler agrees to work with his friends, they try to come up with a plan to stop the founder from being in town, I guess? It's never really established what the danger here is. People are just scared. Is that really enough to warrant the way these guys are treating him? And don't tell me it's just a comedy, because Ed's world followed the rule of establishing what the stakes are. Future Ed actually killed people to show what he was capable of doing to his past self. Santa Claus ate naughty characters' heads, so the audience knew he was dangerous to the main four. Anytown does not get the luxury of getting away with missing a crucial part of any story. Conflict is what drives the plot, and if you don't establish the consequences of this so-called conflict, why am I supposed to believe that what is happening currently is a bad thing? Oh no, an undead being that isn't harming anyone in any way. The horror.
Ugh, kinematophobiia at its finest, am I right?
Eventually, the gang realized that the only way to stop the zombie guy is to lure him back into his underground shelter with the woman, because of what happened in his tragic backstory.
I think we should do a casting call to find the woman of his dreams.
Casting call? Who talks like this? Why is his entire personality just being a filmmaker? So the gags from earlier are reincorporated in a sort of different take on the three kids in a trench coat gag. I do find the fact that they literally used a trench coat for the woman of his dreams costume thing pretty amusing, as it puts a relatively new spin on the classic joke. They lure him in, and if you didn't quite catch what the message of this pilot was before this, don't fret, because it's explored further in this scene.
So, Tyler, do you finally see?
Yeah. I thought I could do this by myself, but you all made me realize that sometimes it's okay to ask for help if I need it.
Absolutely. Like with my movies. I do most of the work myself, but if I need someone to help with anything, I ask.
And we're always here when you need us, dude. Don't forget that.
After today, I'll make sure that I don't.
Well, well. I have one thing to say. Show, don't tell!
That is the most basic rule of storytelling, especially in a visual medium. The first few lines of dialogue before handled this moral much more effectively because they were subtle. When Dean looks upset here, or when Tyler is in silent denial, it's effective enough in driving home the point. I thought animation as a medium is meant for expression, not just explaining the points being made. If I wanted to just see an explanation of a moral without any subtlety, I would read an essay, not watch a cartoon. I'd understand the blatant message if the show was aimed at 5-year-olds, but there's like an erection joke in this pilot, and a vendor at a fruit stand selling melons and making innuendos. This doesn't make any sense! Based on Marc's fanbase and the overall tone of this episode, it seems like Anytown is made for an older kid or teen demographic. So why would you need to teach the moral the same way baby shows do? Tom Scott teaches morals in some of his cartoons, but because he knows his audience, the lessons are taught with much more subtlety, because 13-year-olds can interpret lessons through visuals and subtler dialogue. In Power Ed, the tone is purely comedic throughout most of it, but as it all slowly builds to the climax, you notice something else going on underneath it.
Just admit it! I'm better than you!
And when we get to the flashback scene, everything finally makes sense. Ed has to apologize, and Eduardo has to learn to let go of his grudges and save the day in the end. They both learn from the experience, and the morals are taught without them being blatantly stated in a monologue at the end. Another thing that Tom does well is incorporate messages that are much more complex, because those are the lessons that would most likely be useful to his audience of depressed teens. Crash Zoom is taught the moral of being cautious when doing things that could potentially hurt the people you care about. That's a pretty damn important lesson for some reckless teenagers and young adults to learn, so it's handled with care and tied in directly to the characters and story.
You don't care about anyone but yourself and your worthless movies!
I'm sorry.
Which leads me to my next point. What does working with others have to do with this episode in particular, specifically with Tyler's character? To bring up Power Ed again, from the very beginning of the episode, Eduardo's dialogue hints at and builds up to the flashback, with his vague lines about Ed being a loser and second place in comparison to him. Here, the moral comes right the hell out of nowhere, because besides his one exchange near the beginning with Dean, there is no indication that Tyler likes to do everything on his own. If anything, it's mostly the opposite. Tyler is the first character to start greeting his neighbors, and he's the first one to suggest visiting the others to Phoebe. He's also the one to suggest the idea of them all going out to town together. He's clearly not shutting them out like Lauren says. Wouldn't the moral stand taller if Tyler was consistently a loner? If you really wanted to teach this and think it's important for your audience, make the character you're teaching it more consistently in line with that message. Maybe Tyler could instead be some sort of recluse who's frightened by the crazy antics of Anytown because he's so new to it. As much as I like the opening where Marc's casual manner can shine, wouldn't it make more sense with the moral for him to be at least reluctant to spend time with the others? It would also make his staying behind with the statue moment make a bit more sense because it would give him some time away from the others to just be alone for a minute. Sure, that is a way this moment can be interpreted, but I'd still call that a stretch considering what we know about this guy. If Tyler was more consistent in his character and undeniably prefers solitude to spending time with the others, the lines about him shutting the others out would be much more justified. On its own, it just seems like a ridiculous exaggeration that holds no weight considering the few things we know about him. But honestly, taking a step back, if this wasn't the pilot episode and this was a message being taught in another episode of what this show would be, wouldn't it make more sense to do it with Chris? Near the beginning, it seems like Chris is the type of guy who likes to have control over his work and makes himself overly busy because of it. Many independent artists, including myself, have the issue of not trusting others to do their job competently or in line with their own vision, so instead they do everything on their own, which can make it much more difficult to do the work because of how daunting of a task it all is to do everything by yourself. If this is the moral you want to teach, it would make much more sense with him, and it would create a more easily identifiable character with an interesting dynamic. Both Tyler and Chris have certain traits that are established and then contradicted within this pilot. And if this particular moral was targeted towards Chris, it would improve a lot about both of these characters and make them consistent in their actions. But this is the pilot, so I understand wanting a message to fit the main character. That would just make sense. So there's a few options I can think of if you wanted to improve this pilot's moral in particular. 1. Alter Tyler's character to fit this message and keep him consistent with it. 2. Change the message to fit this character. Or 3, don't have one at all, because a moral lesson is not required for a cartoon. Popular comedic cartoons on TV, like SpongeBob, rarely teach morals. Eddsworld has arguably only 2 episodes with what could be considered morals thus far, and only one of them taught on ironic messages. Seriously, don't do drugs, kids. The educational purpose of a cartoon is not the be-all end-all, and this episode would be greatly improved if the whole moral was taken out entirely and it just stuck to being a full-on comedy. So, with all that I had to say, what do I think about this pilot as a whole? Well, surprisingly, I'm actually pretty mixed on it. I'm unfortunately painfully aware of this pilot's issues. There's definitely some minor dialogue problems when it comes to some sloppy exposition choices and a few weak jokes. While not mind-numbing, it can occasionally feel a bit too blatant, and that can sometimes break the immersion for me. There's practically no stakes established in this story, causing it to become tensionless. As well as that, the pacing is pretty bad in some areas. Over 9 minutes of this 22-minute pilot is spent just on introducing the characters in a ridiculously long first act, and yet we still know nothing about them other than the obvious. The actual story doesn't start until 11 minutes in, halfway through the episode, causing the actual plot to be rushed and almost glanced over. You seriously couldn't have introduced these characters through the plot itself, showing how they'd react to certain situations instead of just showing them doing mundane tasks? The Gravity Falls pilot did this, and not just Tourist Trapped, I mean the actual pilot. Based on all these characters' minimal and basic reactions to what happens in the plot, it seems that Marc doesn't realize that character establishment and development can be intertwined with the plot rather than separate from it. In fact, that's what's most often encouraged when writing a story. But in some cases, I can look past some of these issues. I didn't really notice the pacing problems the first time around, and I've sat through much worse dialogue than this. But then there's the major issues I have with this pilot, the things I just can't ignore. There are 9 main characters, and every single one has about the depth of a spoon. Their personalities are either tired tropes, non-existent, or both, and I find it obnoxious how much they have to hammer in their lack of personality, to the point where the majority of some characters' dialogue is just emphasizing the obvious about their own one trait. And finally, the moral. it just fails in its execution. It's not only completely unsubtle, but it just doesn't fit. It never quite falls in line with the tone, target audience, or the character it's focusing on, which makes it much less organic than the lessons in a similar show like Crash Zoom or Gravity Falls. However, there's actually some potential here. The episode is packed with good comedy, and while some jokes fall flat, a lot of them land, largely because they fit in perfectly with the tone and pacing. But most of all, the acting is what makes a lot of the jokes work so well. Everyone here is clearly having a ton of fun with the material, and despite what little character each of the main cast has, the actors really try their best with what they have. And I feel like I can stomach the lackluster characters more because of the acting. Some standout performances I noticed were Elsie Lovelock as Esmeralda and Lizzie Freeman as Lauren, who are both just hamming it up. As annoying as I find Esmeralda in particular, it's much harder to hate her with the wonderfully exaggerated performance her voice actor gives. Marc Lovallo himself as Tyler was also a standout for me, especially in the first half. I mentioned this before, but the casual manner that Marc speaks in fits really well with this everyman down-to-earth type character. At its best, Anytown has a unique tone that I for one really enjoy. One that just totally buys into this strange world and treats the surreal cartoony logic like it's commonplace. Because, hypothetically, it is. This review may make it seem like I hate this pilot, but in all honesty, I'm ambivalent but oddly optimistic about it. And the only reason I wasn't able to talk about the good nearly as much as the bad is because a lot of the better aspects of this pilot speak for themselves more often than not. I can't dissect each good joke because that takes the fun out of them, and I'd much rather you see the good for yourself. All in all, I feel much more positively about this series than I expected. Despite my problems with it, I still feel optimistic about it in a way that's difficult for me to describe. I really hope this series can continue and improve, as I feel it's a step in the right direction for Marc, in terms of both writing and directing. Even with its glaring issues and with some of my hyperbolic anger here, in all honesty, I just can't get mad at Anytown like I can with the Eddsworld fan movie shorts. Best of Both Worlds is so appalling to me that I find something cathartic in tearing it apart. Tal's Tales is so tedious and fails at its only point of existence that it's frustrating, so it's easy for me to make fun of it. But Anytown? While there are moments of incompetency, in some ways it's perfectly serviceable. Anytown is something I enjoy coming back to, and that I can see myself watching the future content of. And I really hope that these issues are fixed for the future. I'd love to see Marc improve with this project, and like I said before, this pilot is already a step in the right direction. At the very least, comedically speaking. If I had to give this some kind of numeric score to summarize my feelings, I'd give it a 5 or 6 out of 10. While there's plenty of things to complain about, I find there's a lot to enjoy here too, and I'd probably recommend it with that warning in place. Now to end reviews again? I'm tired.